Good Sunday morning, everybody. Happy Sunday. We are recording this this morning, coming off the kind of breaking news of Alabama running back Jam Miller suffering an injury, is going to be out for at least the home opener against Florida State on August 30th. So, not wasting any time here, Alex. You kind of had heard some things on Saturday night. We'll let you lead the way here.
Yeah, it was kind of surprising because the post scrimmage availability, Kalen went through the injuries and Jam was not part of it. And then come to find out a couple hours later, probably 4 or 5 hours later, that there might actually be more to it. And that further testing had shown that there's an upper body injury that was more serious than they thought and is going to knock Jam out for at least the first game against Florida State. It would not surprise me if we're talking 2-3 games. But that's for now, and that obviously puts the onus on a bunch of unproven guys. When you talk about Richard Young, Daniel Hill, Dre Washington, those are probably the 3 top guys. But you're obviously losing your de facto starter in Jam, your leading rusher from a year ago, and the guy I think without a doubt they trusted the most to put on the football field, not just to run the football, but to do all the little things. So a pretty big blow going into a pivotal season opener, although the point spread might not tell you very much with that, with Florida State, but you don't want to lose a guy like Jam going into a game like that.
Yeah, and it's tough because I think Jam was one of the stars, if you will, of the first scrimmage. And that was, it seemed like a guy that, to be honest, we were kind of questioning over the offseason, like, what's the next step for Jam Miller going into his senior year? And it seemed like he was answering some of those calls in terms of solidifying his spot as the number 1 running back. Had a very good first scrimmage. Kalen DeBoer mentioned that, after, last Saturday, and then tough break to, go into the second one and get hurt. And that's something we talked about. It's the second scrimmage is a little bit tricky because you want to get that preparation done. You want to get these players ready to play an opener. But if something does happen, you're close enough in terms of time to the season opener that it's going to affect it. And that's obviously the case here. And like you said, at least the Florida State game, I think a reasonable mind could probably assume that you're not going to rush Jam Miller back to play against Louisiana Monroe. I just don't think that would make a whole lot of sense. I don't think anybody would expect that. I think if you can use that game to play some younger players, Louisiana Monroe is a lower tier Division I team, then I think you do that. And then maybe there's a chance Wisconsin, that's almost a month from now. But then you also have the situation where you have a bye week after Wisconsin. So do you put them back in the Wisconsin game knowing that there's another week after that and going into the Georgia game? So there's going to be some decisions to be made along the way here. But like you said, we know that he's not going to be going to Florida State. And look, the other part of this is we were down in Florida, in Tampa, a couple years ago in September. We were down in Florida, in Gainesville, 4 years ago in September. And you know what it does in September, or in August, in this case, in Florida, is it likes to rain in the afternoon. So if you do have a situation where there's a pop-up storm or whatever it is, like it's Florida at this time of year, and all of a sudden it's pouring rain and you can't throw the ball, your running game could potentially be a bigger story going into this. But Jam's also a very good pass protector, and that's something that you're talking about protecting for a new quarterback in Ty Simpson. You're probably throwing the ball more than you were last year. I think we all expect that. That's another part of this is blitz pickup and pass protection. So, look, I think they have some good players behind them. I think this is obviously an opportunity for Richard Young and Daniel Hill and Dre Washington, the Louisiana transfer. But it's still a blow, to your most experienced running back and a guy that seemed to be ascending going to his senior year here.
Yeah, I think it was said online, so I'm not going to take credit for it, but I don't know who said it. But I think it's worth repeating. This is why you went and got Dre Washington out of the portal, is to have, for lack of a better word, insurance. Because, yeah, I like what Richard Young is able to do. I think he's a really big, bruising tailback, and you like what you hear in terms of how this offseason he sort of figured out the pass pro piece of it, which was kind of holding him back a year ago. Like Daniel Hill, I mean, anytime you compare yourself to Derrick Henry in any sort of way as being that big of a back who can move, you know, there's something there. But the experience that Dre has, being a guy who played a lot at Louisiana, and I know that's not an SEC program, I know that's not a Power 4 program, but it's a program that's won at a high level for a little while now. So his experience, I think if you're talking about who has the biggest opportunity here, I think he's a guy you look at and say maybe he can quickly earn the trust of his coaching staff and find a spot on the field, because he does have that edge in terms of just time playing college football. And they're going to go on the road to Florida State, and I don't care how many seats they've taken out of that stadium. It's going to be a very difficult environment, at least early on. So very curious to see how they handle the next week and a half, 2 weeks, to figure out who they want to put out first, second, and third. And I have a feeling it's going to be at least 3 guys trying to figure out who's going to give you the most.
Yeah.
Right.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. Yeah, I was just going to say, even Kalen DeBoer mentioned it yesterday. You get into the mode now that you're past the second scrimmage where you kind of down throttle a little bit because you're trying to kind of get guys, back and rested, going into the opener. And then you're into really prep mode where it's first team versus scout team. And it's a lot of specific game situations that you're looking at. So some of the opportunities for a running back to really show himself in a fully padded competitive practice are probably past us in fall camp. But I think what you have in those 3 guys. Dre Washington is a 5th-year senior too. I think people should know that. Like, just because he's new, he's a pretty experienced back. In fact, he's the most experienced back in that room in terms of career carries. I'm fairly certain. So I don't think he's necessarily going to be the first guy out there. If you're asking me who's the first player lining up on the first snap of the game, it's probably Richard Young or Daniel Hill. But they offer different things. Dre's a little bit smaller. Obviously, Hill's a little bit bigger. Richard's probably in between. I don't know if this opens an opportunity for Kevin Riley or AK Deer.
Not on the road.
Not on the road. Yeah, if there's a blowout, maybe you can get one of those guys into the game late. There's no SEC roster limit, for your travel squad because this is not an SEC game. So I'd imagine both will be there. But I think you're playing 3 running backs, and it's going to be Washington, Hill, and Young. And look, Brett and I were talking about this. You go back to 2019. My first game was the Duke game, and that was when Brian Robinson and Najee Harris were suspended for the first half of that game. So, yeah, sometimes it opens an opportunity. I think in that game was actually Jerome Ford, current NFL running back, who actually got some opportunity in that game. So, tougher environment, I would say, going to Florida State than it was playing Duke in Atlanta. But it's not the first time something like this has happened where all of a sudden you need to go to somebody different to start a season. But for Jam too, it's a big year for him. It's his senior year. It's his last year. If it was an injury that would keep him out the entire season, which by all indications this is not, then the red shirt would come into play. But for him, I don't think the red shirt's really going to be a realistic thing. So you're probably looking at a reduced amount of games that he's going to be playing in. And obviously he's trying to prove himself for the NFL too. So it's a tough blow for him personally, just missing the time and then coming back too. It's going to be interesting to see, given it's an upper body injury. He's a very physical runner. You're leading, with that part of your body. Just is he mentally, fully, physically there, even when he's back on the field, will be another thing to watch with him.
Well, you took my question out. I was going to try to put you guys on the spot and say who's going to be the first RB out there, but it seems like you guys agree on Richard Young. Anything else on that running back position? What? As I have you guys, I'm gonna Jaden Roberts thing. I would feel kind of remiss if we didn't let you guys have the floor. Alex, you started with Jam. Mike, just real quick, kind of.
It's part of the equation. Look, I mean, you're blocking for a running back, and the offensive line has been a little bit interesting this fall camp at the guard spots, and there wasn't a specific injury raised by Kalen DeBoer after the first scrimmage when he mentioned Jaden Roberts. He said he was dinged up in the middle of the week. And then he came out yesterday and specifically said, I'll say it, has a concussion. He's in a protocol. So Those are always tricky, as I think I remember covering Sean McDermott in Buffalo. He'd always say that like, concussions are tricky because of the protocol and a lot of the rules and the timeline and the checklist that they have to go through. So, look, if you're asking me who's out there at guard against Florida State, I would put my money, and I'm not John Mateer, but I would put my money on Cam Dewberry and Gino Vandermark at guard, just because those guys have been out there for camp. And for reasons we've talked about before, like Gino Vandermark, I think has the trust of Chris Kapilovic, having been with him for a while now. And Cam Dewberry seems to, now that he's lost weight from his arrival in the spring, seems to have kind of filled in at that role. So you get Jaden Roberts healthy again, maybe try to work him back in, see where it goes from there. But just the guys have been out there at practice, or Cam and Gino. And so I think you try to stick with what you have right now. And that's would not surprise me if those are your starters.
Yeah, and that's the important thing to remember with Jaden. And look, you want him to be healthy. You want everybody to be healthy. But we got to remember that there was a competition there even before this happened. Mm-hmm. And I think that was a reflection of a couple of different things, his play, but also his availability and being a guy who just consistently was not out there. We saw that last year. That's why Gino played so much. And I think some of that was continuing. So, it's not a great situation when you've got to kind of pivot a little bit, but at least Alabama's got two really good options with Cam and with Gino. But if you put it all sort of together, when we're talking about the guard spot and we're talking about the running back, who it puts the most pressure on is Ty Simpson. Like, this was already a difficult situation walking into, first time starting on the road against I don't know what kind of opponent they're going to be. Dangerous is probably the word I would use.
Talented.
Yeah, talented, dangerous, whatever we want to go with. But now he's got to do that without a guy who didn't have to worry about when you're talking about Jam. Knew we would protect him. He's going to have to pay more attention to that spot. He's going to have to pay more attention, maybe make up for some of that production. Then you got to, shift in the offensive line on top of it. It's a lot.
You're starting
to manage it, though, because you're going to be the starting quarterback at Alabama, and people expect a lot out of you. But this just adds to it. The degree, I don't know if it's like ×2 or whatever it is, but this does turn up the heat on Ty, and I'm very curious to see how he responds. The interesting part in all this, we talk about how do you make up for the production running the football. Ty might be that guy because he can do it and he is willing to run. So I wonder if they throw a couple more of those. QB reads out there.
Spoiler alert, Alabama's going to look more like it was at the end of last season offensively than people thought.
People will lose their mind.
Right. I mean, look at the 8A game that Ty played a couple years ago. Like, there was design runs in that game for him. He's capable of doing it. I think that's an underrated part of him being the quarterback. So I don't know if people should expect like a complete 180 from what the offense was last year. I think there's still going to be some elements of what they did with Jalen. He's not Jalen as a runner, but he's not nothing either.
Yeah, and if that's the pessimistic side of it, because people always want to say I'm being a pessimist for some reason, the optimistic side of it is, look, this is a really good opportunity for those other running backs. And we've talked about it on this podcast. We've written about it before. Jam is really solid, but he hasn't blown anybody out of the water in 3 years of doing this. So maybe it was a breakout season on the way, but now at least you get an extended look at some of these other guys and maybe see if some of them give you a little bit more in terms of what you're looking for in terms of explosive plays. If they can at least use this time to figure out, okay, who's the change-up back we bring in when Jam does come back? Who's the guy, in certain situations can give us a little bit of pop off the bench? At least figure that piece of it out, because you do have 3 manageable games to start the season and then a bye. This could turn out to be a good thing, but you got to put a pin on that and TBD, because, it's college football. It's a new starting quarterback. It's going on the road. Nothing's guaranteed.
Right. And you might hear that. We'll talk to Ryan Grubb on Tuesday. We'll talk to Kalen again on Thursday. Like, blessing in disguise sometimes are the words that they like to use when there's an injury and it allows other guys to have an we So that might be something we
It works out that way. It worked out with Bray Hubbard. It's sort of working out that way with the guard spot. We'll have to wait and see. But that's the way they should approach it. And you do have numbers at the running back position. I don't know if you've got standout players. That's what you're trying to figure out. But you do have options, and they're all kind of different in their own way. So let them get some extended runs, see what they can give you.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's that on the injury front. Again, we're recording this on a Sunday morning, coming off the news of Jem Miller, upper body injury, confirmed out for the four-state opener. Most likely what Alex and Mike are hearing is beyond that as well. And then Jade Roberts dealing with concussion as well. Real quick, flipping the page. It's the last media viewing this Tuesday, the 19th for you guys. What position? I might know that. I guess we just talk about it.
Besides running back.
What position group besides running back are you running over to see in this last time, so to speak?
Yeah, it's been a while since we've been out there. And look, I think that in that case, like, you're just checking for attendance, especially coming out of the scrimmage. And I know the only two players Kalen DeBoer mentioned missed a scrimmage were Roberts and James Smith, but Latzia Brooks had missed some time earlier in camp. Josh Cuevas had been limited a little bit, so it's just trying to get a handle on, is there anybody else that's a little bit dinged up and we have to be concerned about or pay attention to in any capacity. But obviously the guard spots, I think we'll be looking at the defense, and if there's any surprises. But I think Dijon Lee seemed to get some more run in the scrimmage, and I don't know if we'll see too much during practice that sheds light on that, but our 10 minutes will be spent wisely.
I think tight end is one we got to pay attention to see where Cuevas is at. It's interesting because nobody seems alarmed by it, but it also continues to linger. Like, are you 100% yet? And who is the guy behind you who's going to be tight end 2, 3? How do they kind of mix and match what they want to do? The other spot, it's probably odds on Deshaun Jones, but Husky is still a thing you want to continue to monitor on the defensive side of the ball, just because Deshaun's probably your guy. Trey is a guy we were talking about more at the beginning of camp than we've been talking about lately. And then does Cam Calhoun figure into that? The transfer who is kind of cross-training cornerback in Husky as well. So not a ton of open position battles, but that's one that I think is kind of a pseudo battle, if you can call it that.
Absolutely. One day closer to kickoff. Again, recording this on Sunday, August 17th. Alabama set to kick off against Florida State on the road August 30th. Busy week ahead. Like Mike said, you'll hear from Coach DeBoer and offense coordinator Ryan Grubb. They'll get a media viewing in for a quick 10 minutes. So we'll see what they can get from that. And we will be back, if not before, then soon after, just to, again, reassess and for another episode of Roll Pod. So thank you guys for joining, and thanks for watching.